Hey, everybody. So in this episode, I'm sharing the learning science that explains how kids truly learn, how their brains focus, remember, build skills, and stay motivated. Think of it as a crash course in what actually makes learning stick. We're going to run through 11 principles that have informed our strategy at Alpha to help students to learn faster and remember more. And really what it does is help them feel confident in their abilities. So, class is in session. Are you guys ready?
Welcome to the Future of Education podcast, hosted by MacKenzie Price. MacKenzie is the founder of a revolutionary new school model that's disrupting education through AI. Join us as we discuss the latest in education innovation.
So first up, let's talk about learning science just really quickly. What is learning science? Learning science is a cocktail of cognitive psychology, neuroscience, and pedagogy. You know what's funny? I barely ever even use that word pedagogy. That kind of shows you I'm a little bit of a rebel when it comes to the education world. But cognitive psychology reveals how memory, attention, and motivation impact learning. Neuroscience helps us understand the brain's plasticity and what the optimal conditions for learning are. And then, of course, pedagogy is the method and practice of teaching. Spoiler alert, I believe you need two things to educate a child: a motivated learner and the material at the right level of difficulty. So when done right, learning science supercharges learning for kids and elicits just incredible results. And why wouldn't it? It's an intentional, science-backed approach to educating kids. Put very simply, it's how you know what your kid's brain actually needs in order to learn. Now, here's the problem. Learning science has not been able to be incorporated in a traditional classroom. And we've known for 40 years, there's all these different learning science principles that show kids can learn 2, 5, 10 times faster. But every one of those research papers starts or ends with, unfortunately, these principles can't be put into a teacher in front of the classroom model of education. And this is, I think, where Alpha has really risen above the rest, is that we have created a model that allows such personalization for students that we can incorporate all of these incredible principles. So we are going to jump into 11 learning science principles that you're going to want to know about. First of all, personalized learning is twice as effective as standardized learning. In 1984, there was an educational psychologist named Benjamin Bloom, and he dropped a bombshell research study. He found that students who received one-on-one tutoring performed 2 standard deviations better than students in a traditional classroom. Now, adding to that, he found mastery-based learning is what made a huge difference. So, just very simply put, he found that when you get personalized instruction and you're learning to mastery, students outperform 98% of their peers. That's the difference between a C+ student and an A+ student. Now, there are some challenges that go along with that study, and it's not exactly right. But here's the key takeaway that you want to understand. When you give a student a one-to-one mastery-based tutoring experience, kids can learn so much better than, of course, a student who is learning in a classroom with 20 other kids in a time-based system. Now, since that study came out, many more studies have been revealed that show the same result. The data is definitely unmistakable. Personalized learning is not just a nice to have, it should be the gold standard of academic instruction. There's just one minor problem with that. How do you scale personalized learning to billions of kids? For decades, we haven't really had an answer to do that. That's why it's known as the Bloom 2 Sigma problem, because that's exactly what it's been, a problem. But now we finally have the technology to make it possible to teach this way at scale. AI tutors are what have revolutionized education by making this personalized instruction scalable and accessible for every student. That right there is the Alpha difference that has been such a breakthrough in education. So at Alpha, our students are receiving academic instruction from these AI-powered learning platforms. And that means every child has a personalized learning path. An AI tutor adapts to the student's response in real time, faster than any teacher ever could. And our guides, our teachers basically, they fine-tune the experience with a lot of coaching, a lot of motivation, a lot of empathy, basically. It's like each student has this custom-made jetpack for learning. Every student at Alpha learns their standard Common Core curriculum, just they're doing it at their own pace and on their own kind of level and schedule. Here's the second principle. We don't move on until it's mastered. Traditional schools operate on a fixed timeline. Math is at 7:30 a.m. and goes till 8:25. History is at 9 a.m. and goes till 9:55. Social studies is after lunch. It doesn't really matter if a student understands the material or not. Once that hour is up, sorry, time to move on. We've got a schedule to keep up with. Chop, chop, gotta go. Now, unfortunately, this is where so many kids fall through the cracks. Students develop what we call kind of Swiss cheese gaps in their knowledge. They're blind spots of knowledge that very quickly will compound over time. If you don't understand something when a teacher has gone over it, guess what? You got to move on to the next concept, no matter what. And that's really the problem with the traditional classroom experience. Here's an example. A student who doesn't master third grade multiplication tables is going to really struggle in seventh grade algebra. And guess what? The worst time to learn algebra is when you're in your chemistry class. They then grow up believing, I'm bad at math, or I'm not as smart as other kids. And here's the thing, guys, that is a lie. It makes me want to scream from the rooftops, because I think that the connotations of what happens with this kind of limiting belief are so serious. It totally affects our psyche. It feeds us lies that last for life. In fact, you may have some for yourself, and I can tell you something I'm going to admit here. I also was one of those students. I grew up just believing I'm bad at math. I can't do math. I'm not a math person. I'm not a math girl. And I will tell you one other thing. There are a lot of research studies out there, and there's not a single study that says girls can't do math. So this is lies that are put into kids' brains because they're not getting this mastery-based education experience. And so, of course, when you move on before you've got the foundational knowledge, it's going to make those more complicated concepts really hard. Hence the belief of, we're not bad on something. So here's the thing, though. The good news, it's very avoidable to not fall into this if you follow learning science. And so mastery-based learning is that solution to the Swiss cheese gaps. It's rooted in decades of research, from Bloom's Two Sigma problem to John Carroll's model of school learning and Guskey's work on competency-based progression. The goal isn't to finish the lesson, it's to learn the concept. Somehow, this has totally gotten lost in translation in schools today. If a student needs more time, they should get it. No big deal. If they've mastered a topic in half the time, they should move on. No big deal. Of course, you guys all know what I'm going to say. That's just not possible in a traditional classroom when a teacher has to figure out how to take 25 students through curriculum in a certain period of time. So at the end of the day, all students can master all concepts given the right amount of time and support. And at Alpha, our students don't move on just because it's week 3 and it's time to go. They move on because they've demonstrated mastery. And if they're not there yet, they're able to get that targeted help they need through the AI tutor. When new students enroll in Alpha, in fact, they go through a series of assessments, basically testing to understand where are they when they come to us. What do they know? What don't they know? Based on those results, we can see where their blind spots are, where their Swiss cheese holes are. And then we move them into the right sweet spot that kind of matches what they need. Now, I will tell you guys something. This is kind of crazy. We had hundreds of new students come into Alpha at the beginning of the 25-26 school year, and we were able to do these testing to understand where they're at, where they were assessed. Here's the thing that's really crazy. What we found is students who came into Alpha, and in their past, maybe they were A students on their transcripts from their previous school. Here's what we found. If they were an A student at their previous school in a subject, that showed they were anywhere between 1 year ahead and 3 years behind. Now, if they were a B student, if they had a B on their report card, our assessments showed they were between 3 and 7 years behind. Isn't that crazy? Here's the really blatant thing. I believe so many schools are lying to parents about where their kids are. They give A's and B's out like candy. It's really kind of gone are the days of getting C's and D's and F's. Schools aren't even allowed to fail kids or not allow them to pass. And so that's a problem. So As I mentioned, that's something that Alpha's really good at doing. We're able to see what a kid knows, what they don't know. So let's say take a 10th grade student who joins at Alpha School. After doing the assessments, we realize that he's got some blind spots in 3rd grade math. So does this mean he gets like an educational demotion? Does he have to go jump back in time and go sit in a classroom full of all our 8-year-olds? Kind of like it's Christmas time, like Buddy the Elf. I love that movie, by the way. That's a good movie. No, of course not. Here's the thing. Thanks to our AI tutor, this 10th grader can just get personalized curriculum. He can go back and learn those concepts from 3rd grade that he needs to kind of brush up on. He can go catch what he needs in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and eventually he is able to quickly and very effectively fill the gaps in his knowledge, and then he can continue progressing forward. And this is the way that we kind of work with students at Alpha. And here's the other good news. We often tell our students the fastest way forward is often to go back. Go back and fill those holes, and then it makes the concepts that you're learning as a 10th grader much easier. And again, this is what we tell parents when they come in and are shocked to realize their A student is years behind in a grade level. We say, here's the good news. It doesn't take years to catch up. It can be done so much faster when kids are getting that personalized mastery-based learning experience. Principle number 3. Memory grows stronger the harder that you push. So most of us, I think, envision memory more like a filing cabinet, like store it once, it's filed away forever. But memory is more like a muscle. It only gets stronger if you continue to work at it. So in cognitive science, there's a concept called retrieval practice. It's also known as the testing effect, and it's been studied for decades. It basically means that the act of pulling information from your memory strengthens that memory far more than simply rereading or reviewing material. There's a lot of work that shows kind of why this works. There was a 2006 study. Researchers kind of found that students who practiced recalling information performed 50% better on tests weeks later than those who only went and reread the material. And of course, why is this? Well, because struggling to remember versus just like rereading your notes or something like you have, it forces the brain to rebuild and really reinforce the neural connections for that new knowledge. So just like a muscle, you've got to work your memory to make it stronger. So Alpha doesn't just let students passively skim content like, oh, I've read it once and then I'm done. Instead, every lesson ends with students having to retrieve the ideas they had and make sure they've really got these concepts and then apply that knowledge. So our AI tutor basically will design these challenges that require active recall that make sure that the kids are learning. So every lesson is like a mental gym. It's rewiring their brains to make them stronger. It's making our students go back and recall the information they had. Again, contrast this with a traditional classroom where a student will learn the material, take it on a test, and then they never see that concept again. Our apps are constantly going back and incorporating this testing effect into students so that they've really got this core and strong in their memory. Okay, principle number 4, review smarter, not harder. I think one of the more tragic elements of the human condition is how easily we forget things. Although my husband would argue I sometimes don't forget things I should. But, for real, it's called actually the forgetting curve. And it was coined by a psychologist, Herman Ebbinghaus. And the forgetting curve just shows how quickly we'll lose information if we don't revisit it. Sort of like what I talked about in the last section. The solution is something called spaced repetition. So this was also coined by that same psychologist and researcher. Spaced repetition is basically the process of recalling information at increasing intervals. So you might learn something and then one day later you review it, 3 days later, a week later, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And it may just be the most effective way to actually learn something. There was a study that really has confirmed that spaced repetition, it outperforms all other review strategies. So any student can cram the night before a test and just kind of scrape by like, oh, I got as much information as possible. I will tell you, I have to say I was pretty good at cramming when I was a kid. I did a lot of cramming. So I'm basically doing I'm trying to incorporate in our schools all the things that I didn't do when I was a student. I guess there's a reason I hated school is because I wasn't doing all these learning science principles. But basically, a student can cram the night before and scrape by. But then if you go ask them the same questions a week later, they're just going to look at you blank face, like I have no idea what's going on. Instead, students who actually practice the spaced repetition, they are able to remember what they learned for life. You know what we've actually done with alpha students? We've had them test this out themselves because I think it's actually really important for them to learn this lesson for themselves. We'll have students do a cramming session and take a test, and they're like, yep, okay, I did well on that. And then we'll say, come back and do, the same test 2 weeks later, and they forget it. We'll also have students say, okay, now let's do something where you study over time, do a little bit of studying each day, and then go back and take the test 2 weeks later. And we really think that's an important thing for students to understand and learn because, again, you can tell kids like crazy, don't cram, don't cram, don't cram. You can tell adults that, but often we do. And so it's one of the other things we do at Alpha is help these students really understand what these learning science principles are and why they're very helpful. So to students, I always say, look, you got to learn the material either way to pass the test. You might as well carve it into like cognitive stone and remember it for life. Otherwise, it's just a waste of your time. And that's the thing that's really cool about what we're doing at Alpha is our personalized mastery-based AI-powered learning. It's baked all of these concepts into the platforms. So as a result, these kids are getting the spaced repetition that they need in their lessons to make sure that they're challenged and that they're pushed towards growth and that they're going to remember the things that they learn.
That wraps up part 1 of this episode, but don't worry, there's a part 2 coming soon. Thanks for listening to MacKenzie Price and the Future of Education podcast. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, now is the time to do it so you can stay up to date on all our episodes. You can connect with MacKenzie on social media and be part of our daily conversation over on Instagram at futureof_education. For more info about the show and our guests, you can always visit futureofeducationpod.com. Lastly, if you're loving what you're learning, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back in your feed soon, but until then, remember, kids are limitless, and it's our job to unlock their potential.